Okay, and we're live. Um, this will hopefully save my YouTube as a video. I've been having some issues with that, so hopefully you see this in the future and you're able to come back and look at it. We're going to work on a photo manipulation today, similar to what we've done in the past. Um, I've had a few requests for people on how they do, or rather on how to do certain characters. First off, I'm going to introduce you to the stock site I use for wolf characters because most of my manipulations are wolf characters because I do wolf roleplay. It's something I really enjoy. DawnThieves.com has a lot of really great stock. They haven't had anything since 2019, basically because of COVID, but they still have some really awesome, great stock. There's a lot of stuff in here. Um, I need to check which stock I'm using really quick, so give me a moment to go grab that. I wasn't prepared like I should have been. Okay, so the wolf I'm looking for today, I already know the name of it. All of the wolves on here have names. If you use this archive enough, you're gonna see that. Let me just move my lunch plate out of the way here. Um, you'll see where I've searched a bunch of stuff. We're gonna work with Legolas today. Um, so we're gonna pick a stock image out of all of these. There's a lot of pretty decent ones in here. There's a lot of him where he's dirty. You can see kind of down here where his legs are dirty. We're not gonna work with that. We're gonna work with something else. Um, so we'll go through here and we'll pick out a stock image. What I'm gonna do first, I accidentally opened another tab, is I'm gonna open this, which is dawnrpg.net. It is the website that I roleplay on. I'm one of the administrators there. I'm actually the developer there now. Um, but it's just a wolf roleplay site in general. We're not gonna go over it too much. I'm not here to advertise it. Just this is what we're working from. I'm gonna go find the character I want to work on, which is one of my own. His name is Scorpios. This is him. This is a manipulation I did recently. We're going to use that as a reference. I believe I still have it open in Photoshop actually. So this was his original reference, which was old. Um, this is his newer one, so it's more of an updated way of how he looks. We're going to ignore all of my layers and stuff because I've already done them. I don't want to go through and explain how I did those. It's easier to go through and explain it as I do it. So we're going to make him another image because he only has one currently updated image. So we're going to head back over to this window and back over to Dawn Thieves, and we're going to pick an image. Now there are a lot of pretty nice images in here. Um, I generally try to pick images that kind of capture the character personality. He's an interesting fella. I would say the best way to describe him would be to check his personality. He's reclusive and snarky and wasp. He's not great. He's not really evil, but he's definitely kind of a standoffish guy. So something that kind of reflects that. The problem is the choices for those exact types of images aren't very wide here. We could use something like this. Just bear with me a moment while I pick something. You can always skip ahead to the actual editing. I don't know how well this music is coming through for anyone that views, but I really actually enjoy the sound of it. So I'm kind of liking this one. I kind of like this one. We'll just go through and do process of elimination on one to choose. What I'm looking for here, because Scorpios he's primarily one color with some darker ends. I'm looking for a wolf like Legolas who is primarily one color. It's going to be a lot harder to manipulate a character that is coming from, well, let's give an example. It's going to be harder to manipulate any character that's coming from your standard timber variety. Like, if I were to use any of the wolves in here, So if I wanted to use a stock like this one, it would be a lot harder to use this to create the look I want because of the stark contrast between her colorations. Um, it's a beautiful stock image, it's a beautiful wolf, but it's not going to be very easy to turn this into what I want out of the character design. So you're going to have to choose stock that matches already kind of what you want. Otherwise, your journey is a lot harder. You're going to have to do a lot more painting and a lot more work. So I don't like this one as much as I thought I did. The quality is a little bit lower. And I don't like that he's a little bit dirty because it makes it harder for me to get the coloration along the legs as if it was just a clear image of his legs. Um, so I like this one a lot too. We'll have to fix the lighting on it. It's a little bit too blue for me because it kind of shows this shoulder striping, which he has a little bit of. Not as much as some of his relatives on the site, but that would definitely help me with getting that coloration pretty easily. We'll go ahead and close Amala here. This one I think would be a little bit harder to manipulate. The angle of it makes his back look a lot darker. Um, the expression is more flighty and it isn't really like as intense as what I wanted. This one could probably work as well, but I think I'm going to go ahead and work with this one. So we're going to go ahead and copy the image and bring it over into Photoshop. I never usually save them, I just copy them. So File, New, whatever size, we'll drag that one off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and resize my preview window over here. And here we have our original Scorpios image, and we'll bring this guy over here. Just like this. We'll paste it in there. And now we have our image. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to name this Original. You'll notice that I don't normally name my own, but I know what they are. For your sake, as a viewer, as someone that's maybe learning how to do this as we go, name your layers. It's gonna help you organize and know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing. So this is our original layer. We're gonna duplicate the original layer because we want the original if we ever need to go back and grab it. Otherwise, this is gonna be the one we work from. It's gonna be our working copy. So most of the techniques I use here are not gonna use fancy Photoshop stuff because I also want to do stuff that other programs will use. So I'm going to use filters and stuff that work in things like GIMP. Um, so we're going to first fix the coloration of the image because I did say a moment ago it's a little bit too blue. So the first thing we're going to do is head into Image on Photoshop. There's going to be ways to do this on your programs. If you don't have an auto feature, there's going to be ways to do it manually. You can edit these things manually, but it is a little bit harder. The first thing I'm going to try is auto tone. I don't like auto tone. It washed it out a little bit more. It increased the exposure, especially around the face, and it somehow I think made it still bluer. Yeah, see, it made it a little bit worse. So we're going to undo that one. We're going to try auto contrast. I don't mind that one, but I don't think we need it on this image. We're going to try auto color. Once again, it made things a little too blue. So now is where we're going to go in and do it ourselves. We're going to go and do adjustments. Somewhere in one of your programs, you're going to have color balance or something similar. It's going to give you these sliders for, CMYK, RGB. You're going to be able to play with this a little bit. You can choose whether you want it to only affect your shadows. So you can make your shadows really blue. A little bit more yellow. Put that back down to 0. Or you can affect only your highlights, making them... I generally only work with midtones because that's going to affect your whole image. Okay, so what we want to do with this one is we want to make it a little bit more red and a little bit more yellow. We want to capture that autumn look. And you'll notice that just this tiny bit, it has really helped the appearance of the image. So we're going to go ahead and click OK on that. We're going to go back in because it looks like we don't have a lot of contrast. Now the next step you can do two different ways. You can go and change directly the contrast, which you can turn up a little bit. You'll see it looks a lot better. Or you could come in on Photoshop, you can change the levels. I do not know if other programs have this. Not levels. Levels isn't what I'm wanting. I'm wanting curves. I don't know what other programs have this. You're adjusting the curves of the exposure of the image. These are your darks, these are your lights. So if we bring our darks down very slightly, you'll notice the image gets darker. If we bring our lights up, it creates contrast again. I don't think we need this in particular on this image. If anything, I want to go back and use the contrast itself. So we're going to go back into our contrast. We're only going to turn it up a little bit because the curves seem to do the same thing where it overexposed the face. So we're just bringing in some contrast, making some of those details pop a little bit more, and then we'll click OK. Now we're done for the most part making any adjustments before we even start our manipulation. But that's the thing, you have to make some adjustments before you continue. Hold on, I've got a message here. Okay, and the first thing I do now is, let me move my phone out of the way. I've actually got it in the way of my mouse here. And I've been watering my succulents, so I'm going to go ahead and move the first one really quick. Sorry about that. All right, got my little succulent over here. He's doing good. I'm going to get my next one into water. Just let those guys do their thing. Grab myself a napkin and clean up my own little mess. I apologize for my own interruption. You can, again, you'll be able to skip ahead in the final video. Right now, you'll just have to bear with me if you're actually watching. So there we go. Okay. We're ready to move on now. We're going to do a new layer. We're going to name this one base. You can name it whatever you want. This is going to be the base shape layer. It's going to be us taking a color. So I'm going to take a color that's in contrast to this. So a contrasting color would be something blue. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know what I'm looking for. A complementary color. That's what we're going for. We're going for a complementary color so that we can see clearly where the edges of our lines are. Go ahead and put our brush up at 100 opacity. Make sure it's a good solid color. And we are going to block out the entire shape of the wolf, including his nose and all of those features. This could take longer depending on your image. Generally, it doesn't take me that long. I go around the outside first, and then I just come back in and scribble along the inside. It does not have to be perfect. Sometimes you'll have tiny little gaps. That's fine. Sometimes you won't go all the way to the edge. Sometimes you'll see some fur showing around the edges. All of that is perfectly fine. We're going to work with that. You can go with a slightly larger brush. So, very slightly larger to get these edges here. Anywhere where there's a lot of fur, you can use a softer brush. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. You can use square brackets on your keyboard. Left makes it smaller, right makes it bigger. So we'll go ahead and make it a bit bigger. That way, when we come through here, it's fuzzier around that fur. We're also going to do some other stuff to help the fur blend. We'll come down here and do the same thing. And I'm going to go ahead and come along the belly with this size because it's also really fuzzy. And I'll just work my way up the back like so. The shoulders are a little bit fuzzy, so I'll continue with this size until there, and then I'm going to use my little thing to go back down in size. You don't want to use something super fuzzy as you get up to the harder areas. Oh no, I didn't mean to do that. Simply because it's harder to keep a good solid line if you're using a big brush that's soft. So we'll go ahead and scribble in this stuff. You'll notice that my softness now kind of matches right there. Now to get a firmer line along the leg, you'll just press a little bit lighter. It's pretty quick. I use a graphics tablet for this, so if you don't have a graphics tablet and you're working with a mouse, it's going to take you a bit longer. You can opt to use the lasso tool, especially the magnetic lasso tool, something like that, to select the outline of the wolf and then fill it with color. But I usually just color it in. It's faster. It's easier for me. So we'll lock this layer, lock the transparency, and hide it. Done. New layer. In Photoshop, you control-click the thumbnail to select the outline. Whatever it takes you to select the outline of the base layer for your shape, select that. So I'm going to go and grab our neutral words. I'll grab our neutral brown from Scorpios over there, and we'll fill it in and over here. It's going to fill in the exact same way as the layer we just colored in, except you'll see it's not actually touching it. And now we get to actually play with manipulating the image. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure with a smaller brush that I go back over these areas that you can see that it's not quite covering. I'm going to put my brush at a 20% and just kind of paint over those. Because he's fuzzy, it doesn't really matter if it goes over the background a tiny bit. We're going to make adjustments as we go. We're going to be able to use our smudge tool to our advantage. things like that. I'll go ahead and turn my opacity back up and fill in around the ear. I'll put it back at 30. I use my keyboard shortcuts a lot. I don't know how it works on other programs. In Photoshop, your number keys at the top of the screen will change the opacity and flow depending on the brush you're using. So definitely use those to your advantage. Make our brush bigger here. And again, we're coming in with 30% opacity on our brush and just softening those edges. Because if we don't fill in these edges a little bit, it's going to change the overall look of the manipulation. The belly seems to look pretty good. The legs seem to look pretty good. I'm not overly worried about his legs because you'll see that he has this lighter color on the backs of his legs. I want to retain that. So I don't mind if there's a little bit of an edge showing back there because that's not going to be covered with this darker brown that we're trying to mask the whole wolf with. Go ahead and make my brush a little bit smaller so I can get this through here painted on. Oh, I accidentally hit my bar there. Just again, we're just taking our time. To me, it's taking my time. I know to you, it probably looks like I'm going extremely fast, but it's fine. Get our brush back up to 100% with our keyboard, and we're just going to fill these in. Alright, so I'm going to say that's good enough. You can see we've pretty much covered all the edges of our wolf. Come back around. Now we're going to set this to multiply. So I'm going to double check how I did it over here because I always do it differently. There are a lot of different ways to do this in Photoshop or in any other program. The first thing I did was I had this layer at multiply at 75%. I'm going to turn it all the way up and I'm going to grab this exact color again. So if you don't have a reference image that you can work from, you're not going to be able to do that. But you'll notice that my final image here is a lot brighter. Okay, anyways, I grabbed that exact color, I'm going to throw it back on there. It's not going to be exact, it's not going to be perfect, that's fine. We're going to take it back down to 75%. It didn't recognize that I put 75, so we're going to try again. I think I put 750 by mistake. Alright, we're going to duplicate this layer, set it to color. You'll notice that made it... color specifically changes the color of the image. Now, we're going to take our working copy and duplicate it again. Working copy, we'll say burn dodge layer. So this is where we're going to take the original image and we're going to change key components of it. So I'm going to use my burn tool on midtones. And I'm going to come in and darken all these lighter areas because he does have a darker face than the rest of his body. So what we're doing with this is we're just using short strokes. Each movement of my brush is its own stroke. So if I go up, it's one stroke. If I go down, it's one stroke. And we're just going to darken this image. The reason I do this, I need to go back a little bit. I overdid it right there. The reason I do this after I've already made my other layers is because it looks weird if we take our color layers off. It's not going to look right. You're going to think you're messing up your image. You're not. You have to trust your process. Go slow, steady hand, take your time. Some of it might not look balanced out. It might not look right still. It's okay. We're going to get it sorted out. So I would say that's pretty flat. We're not going with right now to make it as dark as the other image. We're just making it look like there is no... See how different this is compared to back here and around the head? We're trying to make it look like it's all one uniform color. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge where he has lighter spaces. And I want to kind of accentuate those. So I'm going to grab my dodge tool. We'll make our brush a little bit bigger. And we're going to do the same thing. Now his lighter color goes through here. We need to make this midtones, not shadows. And we're just going to come through. Again, each stroke is its own thing here. And we just kind of work on making those legs and things a little bit lighter. We do not want to remove details as much as possible. We only want to lighten these areas. I've switched to shadow now so I can lighten up some of those darker areas that didn't quite look right. And there you have it. He's brown. It's actually a pretty good brown already. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my layer 1, which is my first dark multiply layer. I'm going to do the same thing I did with selecting the base. I'm going to select the outline of this one. I'm going to go down to our working copy, click that layer, copy it, paste it on top of both of these. This is our dark color layer. So I'm going to paste it on top of both of them. And you'll see that because I kept the selection, it pasted it exactly on top. Now with this one, you're going to call this one your soft light filter. Okay. You're going to bring up whatever shortcut you use. For me, it's Control U to bring up your hue saturation. Turn the saturation all the way down. Set it on soft light. Play with opacity. Probably about 30% is what we're going to want. And you'll see what this does is it brings out some of that contrast again, because when we colored over it with these layers, we removed a lot of that contrast. This layer is basically going to sit on top of everything else you do, with some minor exceptions. So now we're ready to come in and do the rest of his image and kind of try to get him looking the way he should be looking. I noticed that this still is a little bit too saturated, this dark color layer, so we're going to come in and desaturate it slightly. Not a lot, just enough that it looks a little bit more like this neutral color here at the middle of the shoulder or back here. This image is also in darker lighting than this one, so we have to keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead with a new layer. We're going to select this kind of darker color here. It's not going to be that much different than what we're already working with. We're going to come in with our brush at 45 or 65 soft at 20 or 30%. We're going to work with 30%. If we have to, we'll erase some. But he's basically got this darker coloration. I'm going to color in a little bit because... And then we're going to set this to multiply. And what you're basically doing here is, again, you're just painting in the darker colors where you know your character has those darker colors. So... We've already figured out how to get our brown color. Now we're figuring out how to make adjustments to that brown color. So this is how you'll get that darker area. Don't worry right now if you go outside the lines. Just focus on getting the colors where you want them. I'm going to go ahead and color in the edges of his ears to be darker. Now that already pretty well matches this area of his face. You'll notice that it kind of is overdone on his nose here, so I'm going to try moving this above the soft light layer. That didn't seem to make a difference. See? Doesn't seem to make a difference. So we'll adjust the nose there in a bit. We're going to leave it be for now. Now, this dude has... You can't really see it in his other image. His throat in his area through here is all a little bit darker. So it's going to be one of the few images that brings that out. Now, we're not painting where we already have dark areas. If I take my multiply and I color this, it's going to make it... It's going to darken it out. So you're going to have to be a little bit careful. You're going to make sure you're only putting darker color where you actually need that darker color if the character has dark colors. I've realized that we've got this area right here on the neck that actually needs to be lighter on the burnt dodge layer, so I'm going to go back and do that really quick. And I'm working with shadows right now. I'm trying to bring these shadows up to mid-tone colors. That was 3 passes, and then I'm going to come in with mid-tones and do 1, 2 passes. That should be enough. And now I can go back to my marking multiply layer and work from there. Now we're going to work on the opposite side of this darker area here and start working in the darker areas around his legs. Do not worry about the fact that he is more desaturated on the image we're working on right now, because a lot of what we're going to do after we have manipulated this image is post-processing. Post-processing is something that I do with every manipulation I do. I don't just throw the color on and go. We have to remember that he's lighter through here, so we'll erase some of the multiply we just did. He's already got this nice darker area around the shoulder blade here. I'm only going to add a little bit up at the top. Erase where I overdid it. And then he's got along this side a little bit darker. We'll play with it a little bit. Don't be afraid to erase. You can smudge. You can, when I need to erase, I don't just have my eraser on 100%. I keep it on a soft brush at about 30%, because then you can erase gradually, like so. Um, keep it where it's adjustable. Now on another layer, we're gonna grab this color, this lightest color up here, and we're gonna come in with that at 30% across the head. You'll have a good chance to see here how I erase the bits that I don't want. But right now we're gonna go ahead and color in these areas, and I'm just gonna work up until it's one stroke at a time. We're painting it on more or less. Work up until it's very solidly colored near the areas we need it to be solidly colored. It kind of fades from darker here to lighter, so we'll only put the lighter more towards the back. And then I'm going to come in with my eraser and lightly erase around the edges until it looks blended. Now, how blended you put it is going to be up to you. On Dawn, we require things to be blended to the point that it looks like a realistic agouti type marking if you're doing something like this. Now we're going to set this layer to overlay, see what that looks like. Overlay doesn't look bad, but we're probably going to prefer soft light. Soft light does some fun stuff here. So we're going to go ahead and bring this color out a little bit more. You can see the gray edges where we didn't quite cover points that we probably should have. And just work some color in there. Have some fun with it. It does not have to be perfect. Alright, so we've worked our color in there. We're going to duplicate this layer. Set it to color. And we're going to adjust it until it better matches what's over there. So we'll turn our saturation down a little bit. Turn our lightness down a little bit. And you'll notice now that it looks a little bit weird around the edges. So on our color layer, we'll come back in and erase around those edges. I believe it's our color layer. No, it's not erase. It's a... Wow. Alright. Grab our color here. Let's put it back to normal. Grab the color we actually want, which is this. Okay, so I'm actually finding that this color layer is not helping us. Let's try turning it down a little bit. That did not help, so we're going to delete this layer. That's our color layer. Delete color layer. We've got our soft light color here, which is fine. I think the issue is that the soft light needs to be a little bit more yellow. So we're going to open up our hue saturation, make it a very tiny bit more yellow. That looks more like what I would want to do with this image. Now, he is very nearly done. We've got a few more steps that we want to take. Let's put this back to normal and kind of grab this yellow color we're using. Take it back to soft light, because you'll notice he has a little bit along the edges of his white down here. I want to go ahead and paint that in a little bit. We'll fade the edges. Sometimes we'll be fading these edges so that you're not even sure why we put the color there in the first place. That's part of the process. I want to bring this down a little bit. Bring some of that chestnut into his darker fur down here. Same with right here on his forehead, where I feel like I erased a little too much, because it does kind of go over all over his head. So it's just, you're erasing and drawing how you see fit to get it to the way you want it to look. The next step I'm going to do is grab this lightest color down here. And that's going to be, excuse me, I just had to cough. My throat is a little strained now. Do the same thing. You're just going to slowly paint this in. I'll erase here until it looks like it's properly blended. Sometimes you'll have to put your eraser down to like 10%. It's fine. Set this at a soft light. You'll notice soft light isn't that light enough. Overlay doesn't make it look right. You can try color dodge. Just turn it down a little bit. Color dodge I think looks okay. We're going to bring some of that contrast back out where it should be. I'm just going to blend this out a little bit more. Small strokes. Play with your opacity. Don't be afraid to experiment. Okay, so things are looking pretty good. We're gonna start with doing another layer. So I've gotten to where I'm not naming our layers. You're gonna remember these by their layer settings now. So this is gonna be soft light, this is gonna be linear dodge, this is gonna be another soft light. Just try to keep track of what you're doing. So soft light here. We're gonna take soft light in the color we're already working with, and we're going to put our brush back up to 30%. And you'll notice that as I do this soft light, it brings out this neutral color a little bit more. I'm kind of wanting that neutral color brought out in some of these places. Not as much on his face, but on the insides of his ear here. Don't worry if the ears don't quite match, just lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to make my brush bigger, and I'm going to go around this area here that's supposed to be a little bit lighter. We'll just lighten that up a bit. And you'll notice he's starting to come together a little bit. Remember, he's not going to be exactly the same color as the other image because they have different lighting. Yes, they're the same character. Yes, they're the same pretense. What you're going for mostly is the overall marking. So we're going to do another layer where I'm going to come in with a dark gray, a very dark gray. And we're going to come in around the eyes with a smaller brush than that at 30%. And we're going to do something like this because he has these dark markings around his eyes. And we're going to go ahead and try, oops, I edited the wrong image. Let's undo. Normal. Alright, we're going to try overlay. Overlay looks pretty good. So with this dark gray, I'm just going to darken these areas. I don't want to darken around that spot too much, so I'll erase where I just did that. Darken around the eyes. I'm actually not too worried about darkening the eye itself because we're going to come back to that. Same with the nose. Don't worry about coloring over the nose. We will come back to it. We don't want to do overlay too much down here because it's already so worn down. But we'll do it a little bit up here. And then he's kind of got darker color along the sides here. Alright. Now you'll notice that kind of washes him out a lot. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Get some of that darker color down here on the legs too. And then we're going to lower the opacity a little bit. You don't want a lot. You're going to want it so that when you pop it up there, it's a subtle difference. We're going to erase along the tops of the eyes because that was a bit too hard. And then we're going to try to figure out what's causing this washed out look. Is it this? It's not this. So is it the color layer? Is it the multiply layer? It appears to be the multiply layer. Our dark multiply layer is too saturated. That's what's causing this oversaturation in the shadows. So we're going to try to take that layer and just desaturate it. Make sure you're on that layer and try desaturating it. So what desaturating it is going to do is change the overall shadow color. You'll see if I bring it all the way up. Let's bring the multiply layer all the way up. If you bring the saturation all the way up, you'll notice it changes the overall tone. We're going to go back to about here, and we're going to put it at 70% instead of 75. You notice how much that lightened the overall image? It's because we had it a little bit too, we were working from our old image, we had it a little bit too dark. That helps our tone a lot. Let's just go back a step. Let's go back to here, which was before our edit. Before the edit, after the edit, it's a very, very, very small change. It might take you a long time of editing manipulations before you realize you have to do that. But if your shadows are too saturated, that's something you can do. Now, something else we can do is just hide these and see if maybe that's something on the original image we can help. Oops, I accidentally brought that blue back. And it is something we can come down to the burn dodge layer. We can dodge shadows at this spot, since it's still a little too saturated. And you'll notice that as I bring those shadows up, it kind of pulls some of that contrast out. And again, it's just a little stroke at a time. Bring those contrasts out. Even out the image. We're going to even out the image right here. Even it out over here. And this spot on the nose that ended up looking really weird for us. So we're removing some of the contrast on areas that make the image look washed out or overdone. What needs to be done around the mouth right here as well. Just work slowly with it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come up to our multiply layer, or our overlay here. We're going to actually choose this brown color, and we're going to try making our overlay that color instead. Because that actually brings out, it can bring out the colors we want. That didn't seem to work. It's okay, just leave it be. We're not going to worry about it too much. That's going to be covered in one of our next steps. So what we're going to do now, we are at a point now where I'm saying we're, quote, done with his overall markings and his overall look. We're going to merge all of our layers. On Photoshop, that's Control Shift E. I don't know how you're going to flatten your image on another program. It could probably be image flatten or layer flatten. I don't know where it is in this menu. I never use this menu. Um, Flatten image. So all you're going for is flattening the image. So we're going to flatten the image. Control A, copy. Undo it. You want to make sure you've got your layers to go back to. Paste what you just did on the very top. This is going to be your new working copy. Now what this means is we're going to take, oh, we need to go back. We messed up. All right. So we actually still have to go back. Select your dark multiply layer like we did before, control click. Select inverse, so you're selecting the outside. And we need to go back up through these layers and click delete to clear out anything that flooded around the outside. You got to do that before you go to your next step. Now we'll go ahead and again, flatten image, control A, control C, undo, back to the point of having layers, paste it on the very top. Our next step now is going to be going back into our image adjustments and playing around with it again. So we're going to try auto-tone again. Auto-tone still washes it out too much. Auto-contrast. I actually like what auto-contrast did a little bit, but not enough. Alright, auto-color. No, auto-color definitely makes it too blue. It makes our colors through here especially just look really weird. So we're going to undo that. Instead, we're going to head into not levels. I do that every time. We're going to head into our curves. And we're going to play with our curves a little bit. We're going to bring our dark here. We're going to bring our lights up a bit. Look at that. Without, with, without, with. I like how it looks with. We're going to keep that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is deselect. Or we're going to use the lasso. We're going to come in around the nose. Around the mouth a little bit too. No, not the mouth, just the nose. And the eyes, including the skin around the eyes. I have my brush on feather. It doesn't have to be on feather. We're going to copy our original working copy. Copy the shape of the nose and the eyes, paste it up on top. We're going to use our brush to erase some of the original color from around the edges. Do it nice and slow, singular strokes. Remember your eraser is pretty much stays on a low opacity so that you can do it gradually and you're not accidentally erasing anything too harshly. He looks pretty good right off the bat. Doesn't look like I'll have to erase his skin here. It actually looks pretty good. We can try lowering the opacity, turning it up, doing whatever, playing with it. That looks pretty good. He looks like a wolf now, doesn't he? Because without doing this, without bringing up that original nose and eye color, it doesn't look right. Suddenly, when you've got his eyes and his nose on there, he looks like a living thing. So we'll go ahead and merge those down to our new working copy. We're not done playing with adjustments, though. We're going to come back in here and head to brightness contrast, and we're going to try playing with our contrast. Notice bringing contrast up does not help, but turning contrast down does seem to help. It helps to get rid of some of our color clashing. So we're going to take it down. Not a lot. It does not need a lot. Just a little bit. You'll see how much of a difference it can make. Just a little bit. I'm going to take it down about 15%. We're going to click OK. Now we're going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Sharpen once. Only once. We only want to bring out some of the details. Now I have a filter that you will have to get for Photoshop if you do not have it already, called Topaz Labs. You do not have to do this step. I do this step. Some other programs will have something similar. What Topaz does is there's a color clean, which will blend things out. We're not using the this image. I want to bring details out, so I'm going to put accent up. Accent adds a waviness to the fur. Let me zoom in here so you can kind of see what exactly it's doing. You'll see this is the original, and when I let it go, you'll see the fur is a little bit more defined. I want to sharpen it a bit more, so I'm going to turn it up a little bit more. The more I turn it up, the sharper it looks. We're going to go back to 100%, and I'll show you in a moment. This is without it. This is without. This is, oh wow, what did I do? Alright. Without, with, So with that is good. I still want this back here to be a little bit sharper because his face is definitely more in focus. So I'm going to grab my lasso tool. I'm going to turn this up to say 14%. I'm going to select everything back here kind of like this, and I'm going to run that filter again one more time. That overdid it, so what we're going to do instead is we're going to come to sharpen. Deselect. There you go. That sharpened it. He's looking pretty good. Now what you're going to notice here, if we hide every layer, and then you look at the original image, this is already so vastly different from the original image. We're not quite done yet. Go ahead and have those there if we need them. So we're going to go a new layer above the working copy. We've already got a wolf that looks pretty good. You've already got browns. This already looks pretty good. But there's little nuances to match this character that we don't have. First of all, this down here has kind of a gray look to it. I want to come back in with one of his neutral brown colors, something like this. It's a soft brush. It doesn't matter, again, if you go over the edges. And I want to just paint over that. And I want to try overlay or soft light or even just the color layer to apply the color I want there so that it doesn't look as gray. Don't worry that it looks too yellow right now. I'm going to correct that in a moment. So first of all, I want it to be a little bit more brown. And then I want to turn that saturation down a little bit, but not a lot. Okay. We're going to go ahead and select our dark multiply again. Select inverse. Delete the extra on the outside. Deselect. Okay. Now if I hide that layer, you'll notice that it's a little bit more red there. It's not as bad. We can adjust the opacity a little bit. It just kind of took care of the over gray coloration there. Now we're going to come in on his face. We still don't quite have the almost black coloration around his eyes, so I'm going to come back in with this dark gray with a smaller brush, 35 maybe. We're going to set this to multiply, and we're going to work this in slowly. Very slowly, small strokes. We're working with a brush at like 30%, little strokes. And then we'll come back in and erase around some of those edges so it blends out a little bit if it needs to. Don't be afraid to color over his skin a little bit. Just do not color over the eye itself. And there we go. We've got his black eyeshadow done. We're going to come in with the same multiply. And you'll notice that on the bridge of his nose here, he is a little bit of a darker color. So we're going to do that. Gradual. Oops, let's bring our eraser back in at a larger size and just gradually erase. It's going to be a very subtle change. Go back to 100%. And you'll notice that darkened his nose a bit. We'll lighten it with our eraser just a tiny bit, but you'll still notice a difference when we hide and show that layer. There's not a whole lot left to do here. I want to make sure the inside of this ear matches that ear. So we're going to grab this, come over here, color it in. Just a few strokes, 3 or 4 strokes back and forth. Set it to color, duplicate layer, set it to soft light. Let's bring the soft light under the color. Duplicate the soft light until you feel it's as light as that. If it's making it darker, then undo it. Lock the transparency of the inner ear soft light and make it white. So we're going to fill that in with white. Notice how much closer that is, and then you play with the opacity. It's really just, it's a lot of trial and error of playing with things and seeing what works for you. This is, the color right here is a little oversaturated, so we're going to bring it down very, very lightly so that it more matches what's over here. Click OK. Zoom out. There you go. So this is Scorpios. It looks a lot like him. It's extremely similar. You're never going to have you're never, ever, ever, ever with a character going to have 2 manipulations that look exactly the same. Even if you're using the same wolf stock, the lighting of the image has a big part of it, the exposure, the details that are already there. All of this plays a part in how this is going, the final image is going to look. The only other thing that I think that we need to do is come in and change right here at the top of his head where his actual, he's got a little widow's peak that comes down into the color. And we're going to take, we're just going to come up here on our own, pick any of these darker colors. I'm going to pick this darker, kind of more of a neutral color. And I'm going to make it lighter. I don't want it to be quite that dark. We're going to go back for kind of a grayish color. Okay, and then I'll color it in a little bit larger, and then a little bit smaller, one stroke at a time, so that it makes this peak shape. Don't worry about how dark it is right now. It's gonna be fine. And then I accidentally set it to color burn. Set it to multiply. And then you'll erase from the outside in until it looks a little bit better. And then you'll come in a little bit lighter around the outer edges. And you'll see now it still adds that little tuft of black at the top. You can play with it a little bit if you want to. And the only other thing I want to change is I don't feel the fur up here has enough contrast. To fix that, we'll come down to our layer down here that we used for our back markings. We're going to select it just like we've done before, so that you're selecting the shape of that marking. You're going to come down to burn dodge layer. Remember, we lightened some of that. We're going to copy. We're going to paste it up top. Really quickly, before we do anything else, we're going to sharpen that twice. I'm going to erase at 100% everything it copied for the face, because we do not want it to affect the face at all. Okay? And we're going to erase where it has down here, and I'm going to erase at 30% this bit here, because I think that bit here does have enough detail. Now again, we're going to set the saturation all the way down, and we're going to try overlay or soft light. Overlay seems to have some of the color retention best, and we're going to turn that down to about 19%. Now you'll notice what that does is it brings out some of that contrast up here on top of the fur. Nope, not that layer, this layer. So it's going to be that overlay layer we just did, 21%. You'll see it pop some of that color out. Now we're going to select all these layers all the way down to new working copy, merge them, Control A, Control C, undo again, and paste that on top again. This is going to be your final working copy, and this is where I finally come in and I do the eye color. I don't do the eye color before this point, or I try not to, because doing the eye color before this point, when you do a filter, it's going to affect the eye color. So we're going to come in. Now, it may appear as if his legs and things aren't as dark as they should be. It's because the darkest point of his legs that should match his muzzle are actually past his wrist, and you do not see his wrist on this image. So I just wanted to point that out really quick in case you thought I was forgetting that. We're going to come in and grab the middle green. So this green, that's about the color of his eyes. This is going to be the easiest step. A lot of people will repaint their eyes on the manipulations. As long as the eye is clear and bright like his is, I don't worry about that. I make a new layer. I set it to color. Find a brush, a small brush at 100%. Sorry, 100%. You just color that in. Just color it in. Don't worry about too much. Come back in with a smaller brush at 100% and clean up your edges. I usually erase the pupil around where the eye shine is, because having colored eye shine is a little bit weird. That's not quite his actual eye color. It should be a little bit more blue-green. I only know that because he's my character, so we're going to adjust that very slightly. The only other thing I like to do is bring in black at 20% around the top of the eye, so the eye has a little bit more shadow to it. Sometimes I will also come in and draw the pupil in myself very lightly, because that allows me to come back in over top of it and choose where my eye shine will go, which also looks pretty good. I think I might actually do that this time. When you do this though, you can't just fucking color in the black and go. So let's undo. You want to color in your black at a low opacity and work up coloring out the eye shine there. We're actually going to work a little bit with that natural eye shine. Just color in a little bit more. New layer. Go with a small brush, so a 5 here. Slowly, in small strokes, paint in that eye shine where you want it. I'm going to work with the natural eye shine edge there. And then I'm going to put my opacity back up at 100 and do a little dot here. Lighter than that. Just a little dot. And a little dot here. 100%. There you go. So all you've done is your color layer. You've added pupils, Very soft pupils, you painted those on lightly, and then you added eye shine. See? And he looks pretty dang good. We're going to merge these down to final working copy. We're going to duplicate final working copy. I did choose duplicate, right? Yeah, duplicate layer. We're going to go back into image tone, in contrast, and I accidentally resized my image, auto color. I know that we haven't used this in the past, but we're going to try something here that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. And that's taking this edited image and setting it on top of the final image at a 25% and see if it maybe helps with the exposure and filtering of the image. For me, it did not. So we'll go ahead and undo those filters one step, see if that makes a difference. Hold on, let me turn it back up. Duplicate file layer. Okay. We'll do auto tone. I don't like auto tone. What if we just did auto color? Auto color makes it too blue. What if we just did auto contrast? Don't like how that looks. You can come in with, what was it? Color balance. Work only with your shadows. Make your shadows a little bit more blue, like this. And then come in with your brightness contrast. Move your brightness up a little bit. Move your contrast down, up, down. Yeah, definitely down. See, this is extremely, it looks like it's had a big filter put on it, but we're not leaving it at this, remember. Set this down to about 20%. And you'll notice if I hide the final working copy too, what this has done is it's brought out some of those cooler colors, and it's brought out some of our contrast, and it just looks overall better. We'll go ahead and merge these two layers so that our final working copy is one image. Now we're going to do what I call manipulation magic. We're going to hide all of these layers we've worked on, and we're going to compare the original to our final working copy. Look at that. It's a huge difference. It's an amazing process. It does take a little bit of time, but it's worth it. Just take your time with things like this. You're going to want to play with things. This is not the only way to do this. There are other ways to get browns that I might cover in the future, but this is how I would do a character that's this dark. You can look back at some of my older videos for how I do some of the other colors. Sometimes with a character, let me just grab another image real quick to do a quick example. It's going to be over here. I'm going to do undo my closed tab. So reopen last closed tab. Reopen last. We're going to grab Amala. Here she is. Okay. So sometimes what you can do with a character, with a wolf like this, we'll make sure we're on this layer. Sometimes what you can do with her if you need to make a brown is actually really simple. Let's say you want to do a brighter reddish brown, so you're not trying to do a darker brown. You want to do something like this. Sometimes it's as easy as coming in with your brush at a large size. We're just going to color her in. We're going to say she has a dark neck. I'm not being specific about my edges right here. This is just an example of how to get the color you want. Sometimes it's as easy as making it overlay and then just adjusting that slightly. It's a nice red color. Sometimes you set it to soft light. Sometimes you set it to multiply. Sometimes you set it to color. These are all ways to get a brown coloration. Sometimes you can use color burn to get like a really rich color. Sometimes you can use linear burn. You'll notice that linear burn adds a really like rustic red color. Not a rustic red. What am I looking for? Auburn, I guess. So you can hit Control U to bring up your hue and saturation. You can adjust that slightly. Get a slightly more brownish color. And then erase anywhere that it overdoes it with if you're using linear burn. But you can do stuff like that and then erase it at 20% and blend that back into the fur as it should be done. And then look, it looks pretty good. That's still a brown color. You can come back in with the color we chose on her back where it's already a darker area. You can also get brown with just using overlay. And you'll erase this a little bit. Blend it out. And then if you, again, you're just playing with hue and saturation. If you take your saturation and your lightness down, you'll notice it gets darker and lighter. If it's over, if there's too much contrast in that, see as you get lower, there's too much contrast for the light colors, then you can set it to a soft light and do the same thing. Control U, saturation down a little bit, lightness down. Saturation up, There's different ways to get different brown colorations. Something else you can do, if you really like the initial pattern of the fur, is you can use your lasso tool to select the fur. In that area, we're just going to say we're selecting this whole thing right here. Copy and paste it on a new layer. And then you're going to hit, you're going to go into, stop resizing. You're going to go into your color balance layer. Whatever gives you your sliders. And if you have a keen eye on color theory, you can actually play with this to get the brown color you want. A little bit more magenta, a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. And that can also get you some interesting colors. You can adjust your shadows to be a little bit more blue to help with some of the coloration that you want. See, we've retained some of how that's supposed to look without all the washing out. And then you can come back in with your eraser and erase along the edges just like you would with a color layer. And you've got this brown coloration along the back. That should work with most of your programs as well. Making browns is it's all going to come down to theory. In general, I use the same practice I used on the other image, which is how you would do it on other images as well. Just the transparency used for it is going to vary on the image you use, because the stock image you use has different lighting. There's going to be different fur patterns. There's going to be different areas that need darker or lighter color. So let's go ahead and pretend this is the same process as the other image. Set it to 70%. Erase some around the little edges to make it blend, where you don't want it to look like it's not meant to be part of that image. And just take your time. So we're gonna select that, copy, paste. I don't have to lower my opacity, she's already pretty gray. Do soft light, turn that back down. Maybe we want to lighten this area on the shoulder. You don't have to dodge it. You can come in with, say, white along the black area and do soft light, and then erase around the edges of that to blend it out so that the black is lightened a little bit. Like, just play around, honestly, to figure out the color you want. Just play with it. You can do some really awesome stuff. You can make this character, this wolf that is gray, you can make her look red. So we're going to come in with a red. Another layer you're going to use a lot that people don't think about initially is your color layer. Just doing a color layer and then duplicating that layer and making it a soft light or overlay will drastically change what you want to do. So let's grab this brown and we'll pretend we use brown for that. Look how nice and red she looks now. We've turned her into a ginger. You got your color layer on the bottom, you got your overlay layer here. If you don't want it to be that saturated, turn your overlay layer down a little bit, or turn your color layer down a little bit. If you want more of the natural colors to show through, use your sliders. About halfway, it looks pretty good. She's now a red wolf. If you want her to be darker, change your saturation and your lightness on your overlay layer. Lightness, saturation. Or if that makes too much contrast, change it to a multiply, and then, play around with it from there. It's fun. Sometimes it can be challenging. For the most part, it's not going to be that hard. It's all going to generally be the same steps. It's a lot of layers and it's a lot of process. It's a lot of trial and error. Sometimes you're going to have more layers like on this one than I did on this one. Sometimes you'll have less layers. Sometimes you'll only have a few. I've got images from recent that I use a lot of layers. You'll see with Champion here, these are my final adjustments. I did a similar thing. This was a soft light layer that actually helped to darken and make more vibrant her brown markings. You've got down here, this is an overlay layer that is actually the color of her markings, which is what I was trying to show. Sometimes you can use overlay and the color you want to get a brown marking. This is a multiply that kind of darkened it, but it wasn't working on its own to do it. So sometimes you've got to do the same markings. This one is a soft light to lighten some of the areas that were too dark. This one is This one is another overlay layer to kind of bring out those darker colors where I wanted darker colors. It does not have to be multiply. It doesn't have to be, this is me taking my original image and bringing it on top. So it's just about playing with the image, playing with layers, experiment. Don't be afraid to try something new and something crazy, because what you're going to find is that's artwork. Let's close that. What you're going to find is that the more you play with it, the more you understand what you're doing, and the more you'll enjoy what you're doing, and you'll learn new techniques, and it ends up being a lot of fun. I'm just going to try to find another example really quick. Just bear with me one moment. I've done a lot of manipulations recently. So we'll look at Anna here. Anna was a manipulation I did a while back. Go ahead and hide her images. So here we had a color layer that kind of colored her ears. We've got another color layer that colored something else. You don't see it. It does make a difference somewhere, I'm sure. This one was an overlay layer that you'll see adds a hint of red to the rest of her fur. And the actual color of that image, we can bring it up here. Normal, all the way up. It's just a brown. It's just a brown, but when it's placed in there properly, it changes the color of things. This one is a color layer as well. That brings out some of her yellows. You just barely see it. Some of the things you do, you're not going to see right away. This is a lighter color to bring out some of her lighter colors up top. This one is a multiply layer that darkened her overall fur. This one is the blocking out. You can kind of see in the thumbnail of all of her actual markings. And that is set on color. This one is me selecting the fur and bringing it up. Here was me lightening her helmet because me adding multiply and stuff made it too dark. It's just a lot of layers, a lot of trial and error. Just play with it. Trust your process. Don't look at it and think, oh, I hate this immediately. Work with it. Work your way through it. Take your time. You're not always going to like what you're working on as you work on it. This guy should be another example of browns. He's more of a rich brown, but you'll notice that before processing, he actually doesn't look as good. After processing, he looks pretty good. But you'll notice that his actual image is going to be this right here. This was what he originally looked like, and this is what we turned the image into. And that's a very stark difference. Original image, new image. Original image, new image. And this is going to be the same process. It's me coming in with a soft light. I came in with a color layer to get his browns. Then I came in with a soft light to actually darken things. Soft light doesn't only mean that it lightens things. It depends on the color. I came with a multiply on his darker layers. I came in with soft light to lighten his whites so that they looked a little bit lighter. I came in with this. It's actually just normal white painted on to lighten the spot on his back. Did it again. Another color layer to kind of colorize that spot on his back because leaving it white looked weird. Another soft light layer. Again, there's a lot of layers just to make that spot on his back look right. It's play with things. If it doesn't look quite right and you think it needs to be a little bit lighter, make it a little bit lighter. Experiment. This is me coming in and adding even darker areas with another multiply layer. This is a color layer over top of that to make sure it has kind of that grayish color still, so he still looks timber. Here we got another multiply layer. The three main layers you're going to use are multiply, overlay, soft light, and, well, 4 layers, and color. Those are going to be the ones you use most often, and it's going to be experimentation, it's going to be playing around, it's going to be just seeing what you enjoy doing. Just trust the process and enjoy it. Don't rush it. Don't get angry with yourself. Don't stop in the middle because you don't like how it's looking. Because if I stopped in the middle on this image when I didn't like how it was looking, we would have been left with an image that was, well, let's see. Hide our blue color. I didn't really like how this was looking here. I knew that it was close to how he was supposed to look, but look at the difference between our mid process, which was about here, and our final image. It makes a big difference to do your post-processing. Trust your process, push yourself through it, get to the point that you can do post-processing and you do all of your lighting adjustments and you do your sharpening and you do whatever filter you want to add, because at the end, your end result is going to pay off. It's going to look better. It's just like any other form of artwork. You've got to trust yourself to know what you're doing and to get through it. If you don't know what you're doing, that's fine. Play with it, experiment with it, work through it. You're gonna figure it out, or if you need help with figuring it out, you can ask someone for help. That pretty much covers everything. I've already been streaming for an hour. This has already got to be an hour-long video, but I wanted it to be packed full of information. You can always skip ahead. You can speed up the video, things like that. You can skip the points that you feel are useful. Um, but overall, that's how you do it. That's how you would do a dark fur. Oops. That's how you would manipulate a character to look similar to what I had done before. I actually like the newer one better than the one I did yesterday. I don't know why this looks better. It just looks better. I like it more. You can crop it out really quickly before we end. Something else you can do if you don't like your backgrounds, say your background is a little too blue, you can come back in, select inverse of your original base layer, and you can play with the colors of your background. Like maybe I wanted my background to look more autumn themed, color balance. You can do these tips and tricks on any part of your image, literally any part of it, to make it look the way you want it to look. There you go. Now he looks like he's more in autumn. Done. You don't have to do any crazy stuff. It's nothing hard. It's nothing that's going to be impossible for you. As long as you have a program that has these settings, you can do the same thing. I have friends that do manipulations that make me go, wow, how did you manage to do that? And they're just using free programs like GIMP. I can probably find an example really quick. I had a friend that shared something yesterday she was working on. Here we go. Just gonna paste it on top of him. It doesn't matter that much. Um, Oh, or just do that. Open it in a tab. That works. This is something she did yesterday in GIMP. Using a lot of the same processes. I think she uses multiply, soft light, and overlay for hers. It's generally the same process. Just play around with your colors. Take your time. If you erase to make something blend, do it gradually with a low opacity brush. Use soft brushes. Don't use a hard brush. A soft edged brush is going to make all the difference. And using this process, you can make images that look a large variety of ways. You've got this one, you've got this pretty silver one she did, you've got this other one I did for another one of my brown and lighter characters. That one actually was a pretty complicated image. Um, if you take your time to work on what you want to do, you can get a lot of really neat effects. If you are an artist that does Photoshop bases for avatars or your character heroes or stuff like that, where you color multiple things on the same base file, then you're already going to be familiar with a lot of these processes. It's going to be building the colors the same way, but in a different technique, I guess. It's a different technique, but it's a lot of the same process. You're still using multiplies, you're using overlay, you're using soft light, you're using linear dodge, you're just playing with color and lighting. That's all you're doing. I know I make it sound easier than it is, but it's the same tips I've given to other people that have also improved on it. The biggest tip, and I know I've repeated myself a lot, is just experiment, play around. Don't be afraid to try new things. Don't hate it and immediately stop. Push through it, get through your process, and you'll find that you actually will. You, you'll get somewhere. You'll get to be what you want with that image. The more you push yourself on it. So, anyways, thank you for joining, or for watching, or just for hanging out. And I hope that this will help you out with your future manipulations on anything you do. This does also apply to other animals and to humans as well.